Carta. I am the CEO of Telaeris, and today we will be talking about handheld badge readers used in access control. The top use for a handheld badge reader is across all industries seems to be for emergency mustering. And you probably see these signs if you work for a large company, you probably see these muster point signs. And the idea is during an emergency, you want to know where all your people are, so that when the emergency happens, you can account for all your people and know, more importantly, who's missing as well as who is scanned in safely. And right now, people use paper most of the time, but with our system, you can use our ruggedized Android device, and you can validate on the order of 200 people in about 5 minutes, which is really, really incredibly fast. So when the first responders come, you know exactly who is safe and who is not safe. And it's much more efficient than any paper-based system. The second top use for a handheld badge reading device is for basically tracking entry and exit into some sort of secure location. And we've done this in terms of tracking people going into mines, tracking people going into places like dams, places that don't have your typical facility where you can install an access panel and a door reader. And maybe you don't even have a door, but you have a guard, and you need that guard to validate people. Many military bases do this as well, and they can do it using barcodes, they can use it doing fingerprint biometrics, or they can do it reading the contactless credentials that most companies, most government agencies have. The third use case that we've seen many people very interested in handheld access control, a handheld badge reading device, is construction sites. We have construction sites obviously don't have a built out doorways or built out facilities or where you can put an access control panel. So by simply having a security guard with a handheld device, you can validate people to know they actually have the right to go into one of these construction zones. You can also validate that they have the right safety credentials, and all of their credentials are up to date before they go into this area. The next place that we see handheld badge readers being used is for TWIC validation. So the Transit Worker Identification Card is issued to people at ports, people going into refineries, people that need to have some sort of government validated credential to make sure that they have been background checked so that they are safe going into some of these secure areas. So these TWIC credentials can be read using the contact chip that is shown on the front of the card. But all of the latest TWIC cards, as well as the PIV cards, which uses the same technology, now also has a contactless chip built in. So those can be read using contactless badge readers. And those can be used for any sort of government facility. The next place that we see handheld badge readers being used quite a lot is for visitor management. The nice thing about being able to have a handheld device is you can greet people, you can scan, you can use a cell phone or a handheld device's camera, take a picture of either the barcode or the front of the ID, which will automatically enroll them into the system. And then when you print out a visitor badge, those visitor badges can then be authenticated as being valid at any time using a handheld device. The next place that you see handheld access control being used are large events and ticketing. If you go to any performance where you're just scanning a barcode, that is really handheld access control. handheld badge reading. In most of these cases, tickets just have a barcode on them. But for many company events, instead of actually issuing tickets for these events, the individuals can just bring their existing company security badges, scan these, and validate that they have access privileges to whatever the event is. And you can actually scan them. You can say this person has 3 guests. They can come with them, and you can actually see all that on a handheld device. We've also seen this being used for tracking meals, where people are issued a ticket to get a free meal. And the nice thing is, you know exactly how many meals people are allowed to have. So if you have 2 meals, you can go get one at the In-N-Out Burger, and then you can go to the taco place next door. And if the system is set up correctly, you can validate that the only 2 meals have been issued to that one person using a handheld device. The next place that a handheld badge reader can be used is for basic employee verification. Somebody's coming in and you need to know that you have access to get into the facility. And in government facilities, as we've discussed before, these PIV cards are the de facto standard that is used to validate that this person is an employee of the government. And those can be validated using handheld badge readers. A place that we see a surprising amount of utility for handheld badge reading is in employee shuttles. Theme parks very often will have a off-site parking lot for all of their employees, and very much like our initial refinery request, where the people need to go into the facility, these theme parks want to validate their employees at the buses. So once they get to the gate, they can just get waved through and go anywhere inside the park. Now, it's really important because that their current access privileges are checked on the handheld badge reader, because obviously in places like, you can imagine, Universal Studios or Disneyland, you might have employees trying to get into the park using the employee shuttle when they're just trying to go to the park. So it's a nice way to validate them before they actually get in. And in a place like a refinery, it could actually be a safety concern. Somebody trying to get into a place that they should not have access to. Another place that we've seen handheld access control being used with a lot of success are for emergency shelters and op center management. So imagine you have people checking in for work to do cleanup. We had an oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico where they needed to track who was coming into work and who got issued what tool. And we were able to do all of that from a handheld device that could read the badges they were issued as well as issue tools out to the people. So not only did they track the time that people were on the site, but they knew what tools they had, so those tools could get returned appropriately. Evacuation centers. During some of the large fires that we have in California, you have schools and large areas that are used for evacuation centers. And unfortunately, people will try and take advantage of that and go into these evacuation centers to steal people's stuff, which is really a tragedy because these people have already been evacuated. Their stuff is already, in many cases, burned. So they only have their valuables with them. So by being able to set up an emergency ops center where you can validate the people going into an area and make sure that they're supposed to be going into these areas, you can actually prevent a significant amount of crime against the people that have already, in many cases, lost many of their belongings. And the last, but by no means the least used for handheld access control or handheld badge readers, is to tie into back-end access control systems. So there's probably 50 different back-end access control systems on the market. And in many cases, they're using something like this. This is a Mercury access control board, access panel, but something like this is used in effectively every access control system. And the idea is you can authenticate against this access control system where a card gets presented to a handheld device. That information gets sent to the access control system. And here I'm showing how it would be sent using our Express Freedom board. And then the access control backend will validate that person and send whether the access was granted for that card. Tying into access control systems just has a ton of uses, and security integrators keep coming up with all sorts of different use cases for tying into back-end access control systems. The funny thing about this is actually right where we started. So 10 years ago, we built that system that used a handheld badge reader, a little bit more primitive, to read a badge, which sent wireless information to a interface device that talked to an access control board and then sent back the green light. So it's funny how things change, but much of the back-end technology still remains the same. There are quite a number of other uses for mobile access control systems. Things like timekeeping, basically knowing who's on your site and being able to pay people for the right amount using a handheld device. We did a solution for a road rally in Baja California where they needed to enroll people on site, and so we used a Android-based system that issued barcode credentials, tie them around their wrist, and these people were now enrolled and they were able to get into the parties and all the places they were supposed to, assuming they had paid the appropriate amount to get into those specific areas. Handheld access control systems get used for ski resorts. You can, using long-range UHF, you can read right through people's thick jackets and read them from a reasonable range. Handheld access control gets used for long-range vehicle identification. Busing people into a city from an urban area. Biometrics are becoming more. Biometrics is using something like a fingerprint or your face or your iris to validate you based on who you are. And more often these are being used through handheld devices. We already talked about government authentication. Many companies want to be able to track training attendance. Did people show up for training? We had a hospital come to us and want to be able to track that all their nurses had been vaccinated, and they were able to track whether they got all the different types of vaccinations and put that directly into the HR system. And then any sort of cruise line, ship, any place where you need to do a muster where you're basically doing a roll call of everybody to make sure that everybody's safe. So those are the top 10 plus a few uses for handheld access control or handheld badge validation. And if you have any questions, this is my information, but you can just give us a call and we are more than happy to answer any of your questions.